Hello. Recently, I got a comment on this video saying to build a large Minecraft map, and normally I would look at that and say, well, I don't want to, and I don't care what everyone else is doing, but then I looked at the views these videos got. So, to start off, I found a spot that was out of the way from the other things I had built and upped my render distance to 32 chunks. Looking out over this beautiful landscape, I immediately got to destroying it. Using Axiom, I was able to level nice-looking terrain in a matter of seconds, but that wasn't enough. I messed around with some of the levers in the menu, and suddenly I was destroying land much faster. Next up, we had this large flat area, but it had some issues. The biggest being all this floating junk in the air. So I removed it, and after that, I turned all the ground to stone and started raising the land to give me more space to build. But you may be thinking, why is there no time lapse? Because you're a stupid idiot who keeps asking all these nagging questions, and it's because I forgot to record, but now we have this. This is not a good-looking Minecraft map. So, to start off, I'm making a village, first creating some terrain, then mapping out the village. Building up the houses. For these, I'm using this simple gradient. And as I'm building up the houses, I also started adding things like gardens, bushes, and trees, as well as so much grass. I do not know how to get a tool that does it for me, so for right now, I'm placing it all by hand. And yes, at this point, every house, every tree, every rock was custom with me designing and building each of them separately, which looks nice, but has one major downside of being slow. Later on, I'm going to try and fix this, but for now, enjoy all the different looking stuff. Oh, and I also fixed the path. With the main parts of the village complete, I moved on to the center of the town and started adding a little trading area, as well as a fountain. Next up, it was time to bring in some help, so welcome DazedBrush. He's a different one. He's here to add details that I don't want to, like doors. I also asked him to give me some feedback on the village, and one of the main things he said to add was a dock. With him working on that, I laid out a large stone platform and got to building up a couple of birch trees. These ones even have shading. Ooh. Then I pasted copies of them behind the village to frame it in, and after that, I got the idea that this place needed a map area. So I built up a building in a totally different style from the rest of the village, and then got to work on the maps. First up, I got the map of the area I was in, but then I needed to take a break. Oh, I gotta pee. Okay, back from peeing. After that, I was able to put together all the maps, even if, while doing it, I did break everything and had to do it again. With the maps done, I then moved on to making one of the only interiors I had done in a while to finish off the map room, making it look overgrown as well as lived in. At this point, I thought I was done. I even recorded a shaders walkthrough and showed it to DazedBrush, at which point he told me I forgot to add the dock. So, I went back onto the world and did it, adding in a weird-looking curved dock as well as some cargo and some stuff on top of it. Then I moved on to adding a ship, which I tried to make different from some of the other ships I've built in the past. You also may notice that randomly there are shaders on right now, and that is because I don't know if I like having shaders on in a time-lapse. So instead of doing a couple videos testing out shaders and non-shaders, I just made some of these time-lapses randomly have shaders on. So tell me which one you like more in the comments. But with the ship finished, now the first major build on the map is complete. And if you thought that was the end of the video, I'm afraid to say there's a lot more coming. And the first of those we're gonna start building right now. Wow, that was a great transition. We're gonna start building up these cliffs right here, and I did spend a while texturing them. It took me so many different tries to get this right. You can see me changing the colors a lot, and I don't even want to go into it because this isn't even the final iteration, but I'm trying to darken and lighten the rocks to show highlights and shadows. Then I moved on to adding grass to it to make it look more overgrown and to break up all the stone. And I had to spend about 3 hours doing that, but finally we could move on to building the castle. First up, I wanted to lay out a general shape using stone to get a good idea of how it should look. I started with big squares and then tried to add little details until I got to here. I was happy with this and then again moved on to texturing, which once again proved to be a bit of a problem. The first gradient I did was just a shadow because I didn't know the wall color, and then once I did, I had to redo it. I then added some details to the castle, which mainly consisted of windows and some arches, as well as fixing up the roofs, and after that, I wasn't happy with the build, but it's important to remember that when you have a problem with something, it's okay. You just have to stay quiet, bury it deep inside you, and just let it fester and cause problems later. So I did that with this build, mostly using trees as a way to cover up the parts I didn't like, including the birch trees I had made previously. With the front of the castle finished, I didn't like how small it looked, so I built up some towers on both sides to be able to frame it in nicely, as well as giving it that height that I wanted. I then built some bridges connecting it to the main building, as well as shadows to help give some interest to the totally blank walls I had just made. To finish up the castle and the oceanside area of the map, I then added a tree here to cover up the parts I didn't like, kinda like what I did with the base of the build, and with that, the castle was done. Now it's time to ask you to subscribe and come up with a creative way to do it. Ooh, I could do that YouTuber thing where I just pull up the analytics and show how many people aren't subscribed to try to like guilt trip you into subscribing. Does that even work though? With the previous two things completed, I was running out of ideas, so I did the only reasonable thing and turned those two builds into shorts and got ideas from you guys. And you had a lot of bad ones. So let's start building one of those. One of the comments I got was on a previous old video saying that I forgot to add a wheel to my ship. I checked, I did not in fact forget to add a wheel to that ship, so I decided that we had to fix that in some other way. So let's go do that. Epic transition. To start off building this idea, I first needed some land that it could be sitting on. So I built up this massive savanna so that we could work in a biome other than the plains. I then added a path traversing through the landscape, and after that we started working on the actual build. The first thing we wanted to do was to actually build the wheel and attach it to the ship right away. After that, I started adding details to the ship like mast, sails, things, but the ship obviously can't move. It's tilted on its side, so we need to build little houses for the people who work in the ship, for them to live in. After that, we added some final details like bushes. I wrote Ukraine in the script, but we added a crane. We didn't add Ukraine. And after that, we were done. All that was left to do was to name it after the dude who commented this place and do a shaders walkthrough. But our ship that has wheels is fixed, and I didn't forget them this time. Next up, I wanted to really expand and fill out more of the map, so I started working on some tree designs. Expanding out the platform I had built for the birch trees, I was able to build out 5 much smaller oak trees that I could use throughout the rest of the build. First up, I wanted to fill out the area beside the town, adding in a forest. The first and easiest step was just going through and pasting in the trees, and after that, I wanted the underside to feel a lot more like a forest as well. So using leaves, flowers, and ferns, and a huge amount of grass, I built out the bottom of the forest. I also made some paths running through it. To add a little fun detail, I moved towards the edge of the forest and built a log that had fallen in the river. I also had a small little dock next to it, as if this was a closed-off location that the kids in the village had to themselves. I also made a little swing as well and tried to make the end of the river look cool too. After that, I traveled back to the savannah to add more details. First up, I added a lot of trees and grass to break up the empty landscape, and then after that, I added a small farmstead that had cows roaming throughout, which was a bit of a pain to set up, but I do really love how the fence came out. Next, I wanted to make a small little wagon on top of the hill with a little campsite next to it as well. At this point, I felt the area was coming along really nicely, but I also thought that there should be more life in this area, so I wanted to build up another town. Before we could do that, though, I once again needed to do more landscaping, so I built up these small hills and a river running through it, but I wanted a village here, so I needed a path, so I built one, as well as making this diagonal bridge over to our future village. After that, I built up a test house to see if I liked the style, and then after I was happy with it, I then tried to replicate that similar style in the other houses, but I did change the colors and how they looked to give it some variety, so now we have some white houses, yellow, and brown houses. The brown ones look a little stupid as there's just so much brown in the background that they blend in with it a little bit. After that, I figured we needed a field, so I built 2 small flower fields, but with so many towns and houses being built up, it would make sense if there was somewhere people got food from. So now we have this massive wheat field, which even has some scarecrows in it too. After that, I did detail the town a little, but I lost the replay for it, so I'm just gonna give you a walkthrough with some of my favorite details being the apple trees. With having to build so many big builds or just a ton of small little houses, I wanted to spend some time focusing on just one build. So I zoned in on this area right here and started building up an inn, laying out a ton of different shapes for the houses and mushing them all together, and then trying to add a ton of details, like a crane overhanging off the side that I put a sign off of. But because I've taken so much time to talk about that sign, I've run out of time to talk about all the other cool details in the build, so instead enjoy these shaders. Next up, I wanted to add a little more, so I'm moving right beside the village to build up a second wheat field, and after completing that, I made a windmill and tried out a new blade design. I also made a house for the windmiller to live, as well as a chicken coop. Then, once again, I was feeling out of ideas, so I looked at more of your comments. Here are some of my favorites, but one that stood out to me was this one. Build the entire state of Pennsylvania. They had also never been to Pennsylvania, so them asking made total sense. So, let's get started. First, I wanted to make sure I got the shape of the state correct, so I googled it. Because, let's be honest, no one remembers the shape of Pennsylvania. After that, I started outlining it, but it was too small. We are building the entire state of Pennsylvania, and we're going to need a lot of space. During this, I got a call asking if I wanted to join a building competition, so that is why you see this suddenly appear. For those of you interested, I did end up winning the building competition because I'm so great at building, and you should subscribe to me because of it. Oh, no? You're not going to? Stupid! 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 No, stupid! Stupid! You knew they weren't gonna do it! Stupid! Anyways, moving on, I got the shape of Pennsylvania down and then raised the terrain. Next up, I needed to know exactly what's in Pennsylvania, so a quick Google search of the area revealed a couple of things. First up, you had Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell. which both made sense, but after that, the top location is an old prison and the Longwood Gardens, which feels like a terrible, great name for a garden. So now knowing all there is to know about Pennsylvania, let's get started. I wanted to first work on Independence Hall because it's the most important location on my list. So after shaping it all out with stone, I started working on coloring it, specifically the top of it. And though I had only one image to work off of, I got something I was pretty happy with. And after that, I wanted to work on the sides. And so I wanted to find some more images of this place, and I discovered something terrible. It is all off. The thing on the top is in the center. The picture I had made it seem much closer to the front of the building, and I was way off. And then I thought for a second and remembered it's just Pennsylvania, and I don't really care about it, so it's not changing. Next up, we're working on the rest of the build, which apart from the windows, which I spent a little time on, was very simple. So while I'm doing this, if this video gets 400 likes, I will come back and fix it, otherwise it's just gonna stay like this. After that, it's time to focus on the highlight of Pennsylvania, their prisons. I started laying out the shape based on this image I found on Google, first just using stone, and trying to get all the key elements laid out first. After that, I moved on to coloring, as well as shaping using some stairs and walls and things like that. And the prison is quite messy from the image, so the texturing came out quite messy, but I also think that I managed to represent the prison fairly well. Alright, to finish off the entirety of Pennsylvania, we're building up the Liberty Bell, and then I brought on a friend to work on the Longwood Gardens. Then I added some final details like trees, bushes, and paths, and we're left with this. I'm okay with how the Liberty Bell came out, and the Longwood Gardens look exactly what I expected something named the Longwood Gardens would come out. But with that, the entirety of Pennsylvania is finished. I also thought I should just give you that quick showcase of that competition volcano build thing that's off in the distance. And now it's time to add our final viewer-suggested idea, which is, of course, a giant toilet. Now, I interpreted this as a giant golden toilet, because if you're gonna have a giant toilet, it might as well be made of gold, so I pasted that into the side, as well as added some stains to it, also golden, and a pea stain off to the side. But that is the final build that we have in this area. I'm going to go through and add in some finishing details, and then give you guys a final walkthrough of the section of this massive map that we built, because we didn't even cover like a third of it. Alright, let's go over this. We have the village area that we built first with all these different cool areas that I love. We have the Savannah with its ship and the cow stuff and all that. We have the castle with its insane terraforming and my favorite trees. Next up, we have the whole town area with the fields of wheat, the inn that I really love, the little village that you can walk through. I did add some details like grass and stuff throughout here to make sure it felt nice when you were walking along the path. And then we come into the weird section full of the golden toilet and the Pennsylvania stuff. I actually really love how the Independence Hall came out. It's one of my favorite builds. And then we come on to the final bit that I worked on, which is this cutoff point. I wanted to break up the map because I see a lot of other Minecraft map builder YouTuber things doing that. And so I did that here. I also planned out this pattern that can go along the side to give it a cool cliff face. It looks good even without shaders on, and I just really love how this entire area came out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this video took a little bit longer to come out, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, this is actually the biggest build that I have ever done before, and two, there was a bunch of issues with monetization with YouTube, but now that that's sorted, thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.